respond to all these things. So we recognize early on as the office that's responsible for supporting the procurement of all of these new initiatives, all these new services that we're putting out, that we couldn't do things the same old way that we've always done them. So we've tried to be innovative, and we've tried to look for some new ways to do some things, as well as use some existing infrastructure that the State Department of Administrative Services has in place. But just to recap for just a moment on what are our bidding requirements. So for operational and routine maintenance purchases, GDOT is not required to bid procurements for less than $25,000. However, anything over $25,000 does require the bidding process. For construction and routine maintenance purchases, a lot of things that Dale has been talking about, GDOT has some latitude for purchases up to a maximum of $200,000. But anything greater than $200,000 must be posted to a website known as the Georgia Procurement Registry in accordance with state law. So you may not realize, I know many of you are familiar with responding to the construction bids that Construction Bidding Administration puts out. There are actually notices that are posted on that website notifying the world that opportunity is available. So the procurements that we're going to be discussing today, however, are going to be bid through a system referred to as Team Georgia Marketplace. That's the backbone upon which we're building it. But that system then posts these opportunities to the Georgia Procurement Registry. Now, let me say that I'm going to have a more detailed presentation that will be posted online, along with the other presentations that will have more slides included. So I realize that a lot of this may be nuts and bolts and a lot of details that this is a difficult venue to see some of the screens. All this information will be available on our website, and we will have some other information for you as well. So the procurement method that we're going to focus on today is referred to as a request for qualified contractors and then a resulting invitation to bid. Okay? So essentially, a request for qualified contractors is a pre-qualification process with an extra step, and an invitation to bid is simply a low bid or a request for quotation. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. So I've mentioned that we're working on the backbone that our State Department of Administrative Services has established through its State Purchasing Division. And they have a web page which you can access by going to www.doas.ga.gov. And this is just a sample of what their web page looks like when you log on. You'll notice they have a link there, an area for business services, and the one that you would want to go to would be the one labeled State Purchasing. From there, that is going to open up another window, which will have a couple of things on there, statewide contracts. The second one, however, being suppliers. And that is where you would want to click on to be able to get more information, is that suppliers link. So once you click on that, it's going to tell you how do you get started as a supplier. You see there's some areas of focus there in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, and one of the things that it has there is getting started as a supplier. From there, we'll take you to another window, which is the inset that you see, and we'll ask you to click here for more information about Team Georgia Marketplace. From that link, that will then have another page that opens up that is indicated as Supplier Self-Service. So I know that seems like a lot of clicks. Again, we'll have this on our webpage for you to be able to access. And I know in a previous meeting, our commissioner mentioned that really once you get familiar with this system, it is a very intuitive system that you'll be able to, with a couple of times through, you'll be able to figure out how to access. And we are always available to assist if needed. So a couple of terms I want you to be familiar with as you learn how to register for this system. So the system refers to a sourcing bidder and a supplier. Basically all that means, the terms are interchangeable. However, a sourcing bidder is someone who has registered and has never received an award. A supplier is a bidder who has registered and has received a reward. Now, why is that important? Because on the next screen, in the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that you have an option to register as a sourcing bidder or to register as a supplier. This is something that is built into the system, and we bring this up so that you don't get confused when you go out and see it. If you're not registered within the system, simply register as a sourcing bidder. Once you receive a reward, you're not required to go back into the system and re-register as a supplier. You're kind of automatically transitioned. So when you get ready to go and register, because this system is the means by which you will receive the notifications about all of these bid opportunities. It is a free service. We do not charge you. The DOS does not charge for its utilization, and where you can be made aware of every bid opportunity that not only GDOT puts out, but every other state agency as well that meets certain categories. Once you log into this system, and let me say I would encourage you to register as many email accounts as you see fit. We see some firms will only register one. From that, that's the only person that will receive emails from the system. Some firms choose to register multiples. Some firms choose to register one and have it go to a mailbox. So whichever avenue you choose to use, make sure that somebody is going to be receiving the emails, because we desperately need you involved in this process in order to be successful. So a couple of things I want to highlight as you register. One of the things that it is going to ask you for is it's going to ask you to identify an NIGP code. Now, what in the world is an NIGP code? NIGP stands for National Institute of Governmental Purchasing. So it's a series of about 1,500 codes that have to deal with every service and commodity essentially known to man, or that government may purchase anyway. These codes provide some efficiencies. It allows us to standardize some purchasing processes, as well as to allow us to identify what products and services we are trying to purchase from the supplier community. The important thing to remember, so it will ask you to search on codes. GDOT has identified 4 codes that you need to make absolutely certain that you select when you register your company. The top 2, 91327 stands for construction, highway and road, and 91313 stands for construction, bridge, and drawbridge. So if you're interested in doing roadway construction work, and a lot of the things that Dale has mentioned may fall into that category as well, make sure that you register for these 2 codes. However, if you're not interested in doing construction, but you're only interested in grounds maintenance or roadside maintenance, then the 2 codes you'll want to make sure you select are 98836 and 98875. And of course, again, we will have this information on the website, so don't feel like if you miss them that you won't be able to get them. So we just tried to make sure that we knew exactly the codes that our staff would be selecting with each of these opportunities, both with the RFQCs and the resulting ITBs or invitations to bid that we'll be putting out. So these are the standard codes that my staff will ensure are being utilized. So back to the getting started as a supplier, one other piece of good news that we wanted to point out is that another thing that this is going to ask you for is to identify whether you are a Georgia resident business or whether you are a small business. Now, state code identifies that a little differently than the federal. The state code identifies Georgia resident business as any business that regularly maintains a place from which business is physically conducted in Georgia for at least 1 year prior to the date of the bid, or a new business domiciled in Georgia, which regularly maintains a place from which business is physically conducted in Georgia. However, it says that has to be a real business. It can't be a site trailer or a PO mailbox or something of that nature. So it has to be a legitimate business address. State code defines a small business as a business which is independently owned and operated with either fewer than 300 employees or less than $30 million in gross receipts per year. And then there's a third category, which is essentially both a Georgia resident small business. Now, in the past legislative session, our legislators granted us the ability to give some preference to these groups of vendors. And we're excited about that because for the first time, what that means is we will identify whether we're going to apply this both in the initial invitation to bid. So we will have to be identifying whether we're going to apply this in each one. Some may apply and some it may not, but where it applies, and we're going to try to use it as much as we can, a supplier who meets one or more of these definitions would be given preference over someone who does not. And that preference would be that if they wind up not being the low bidder, and somebody who does not meet one of these designations is not the low bidder, they will be given the opportunity to price match for a total of 5% up to a max of $10,000. That is the rule that our state purchasing division has put in place. We'll be looking at the law to make sure to see if there's maybe some other avenues that we could use as well. But that is what we're intending to do right out of the gate. So again, we're excited about the opportunity to be able to give some preferential consideration to our Georgia resident businesses as well as small businesses. First time we've been able to do something like that. So what is an RFQC and how does it work? Essentially, an RFQC is very similar to a pre-qualification process. However, it is not a pre-qualification process that you're familiar with as in construction bidding administration. All right, I'm being told to pull the microphone down. Okay. So it is not what you're familiar with the construction bidding administration pre-qualification process. And it actually goes one step further. So what happens is we'll advertise an RFQC. Remember, it goes out to every firm who is identified as wanting to provide those services through the selection of those NIGP codes. Oh, by the way, if you have not registered for the NIGP codes and you happen upon the website, you will still be able to respond. So it's not a foregone requirement that you have to respond and to be registered in order to be able to participate. However, the next step, you will have to be. So the RFQC will not require you to provide any pricing information. Basically, what's going to happen is the State Maintenance Office will be working with us to identify what qualifications that you need in order to be able to provide any of these services that Dale just shared with us. So there'll be an RFQC for every one of those services. Once we have selected the suppliers or the contractors who meet those standards, the next step will be an invitation to bid from an issuing officer who will conduct that from that point forward. So once the RFQC closes, there'll be an evaluation conducted. That evaluation will essentially look to see, did you pass all the requirements that the State Maintenance Office believes you need to have in place in order to qualify. And I'll tell you, the mindset is, we want to make sure that folks are qualified to do it, but we want to be as inclusive as we possibly. Who meets those qualifications will have a on-call contract signed with the department. But again, it doesn't result in any work. That comes at the next step. So every RFQC then becomes an invitation to bid. And the beauty of this is we'll be pre-qualifying you on a statewide basis, but you'll be able to decide which ones of those opportunities you are interested in participating in. So if it happens to be an area of the state that you're not interested in providing, then you would simply just ignore that invitation and wait for the next one to come. But we desperately need you all involved in this process. So every contractor who has registered for those NIGP codes will receive a subsequent notification for every invitation to bid that we release. So we're trying to be as open and transparent and inclusive as possible as we can with this process. The good news is this is what we consider a continuous open procurement. So in the past, with some of the ways we've procured routine maintenance contracts, is we've procured them one time, and they've been in effect for essentially up to 5 years. So this is a little bit of a change from that, in that we will post an RFQC. That RFQC will close, an evaluation will be conducted, and all the contractors who make the list will be pre-qualified and have on-call contracts signed. However, we want to be able to open that pool up every 6 months so that additional vendors, contractors will be able to get on that list, because we want as much competition as we can possibly have. So it might be that when you first apply, you didn't make the cut. You may not have had the qualifications. You may not have had some equipment necessary. The good news is you'll have another shot at it in another 6 months. But each one of those contracts, you won't have to pre-qualify every 6 months if you're issued a contract. That will be good for up to 5 years. So continuous and open, that's another thing that's different about this process. So just kind of in summation, the RFQC is qualifications based. But then everyone who is pre-qualified will move into the next phase, which will be an invitation to bid, which will be awarded on a price basis. So it will be a low price, a low bid scenario, as you're already familiar with. So one thing we want to point out is this is different from the process you're familiar with through construction bidding, in that we will not be using Bid Express. We will be using the Team Georgia Marketplace application, as I've already mentioned. So we just wanted to have a slide that mentioned that, because that is an important difference in the process. A little more nuts and bolts. This is an area where I have a lot more slides available that will be in the presentation online. But back to the DOAS webpage at doas.ga.gov. Again, you want to click on the state purchasing pane. From there, there's a link for suppliers, and that will bring up another window with relevant links in the bottom right-hand corner and a link to Team Georgia Marketplace. And if you can go through this system in two ways. This is going through it just by accessing the website. That's how you get there. What that will do is it will take you to the application, which that's what you see on the screen there on the left-hand side, and it will ask you to log in. You'll be asked to give your user ID and password. The good news is, if you have registered for those NIGP codes, it will send you an automatic email and will take you directly to the bid that you are interested in once you log in. However, if you choose to go through the website, once you log in, there will be a window that opens, and you will click on Manage Events and Place Bids. From there, that will open another window, which you see in the bottom right-hand corner, and the link you want to click on there is View Events and Place Bids. So as I mentioned, if you have registered to receive the automatic notifications, you will be sent an email anytime both GDOT and any other state entity within the state of Georgia, and in a lot of cases local governments as well, you will receive the notice anytime anyone is purchasing any of these services. So it will be up to you to decide which ones that you want to respond to. We certainly hope you'll respond to ours. So one big difference between the RFQC, which will result in most likely a hard copy response being sent to One Georgia Center, to our address here. The invitations to bid will be submitted electronically through the Team Georgia Marketplace application. And one of the main differences is that will require a place for you to provide a price response upon which that ultimate award will be based. So that's just a screenshot of what a price response page would look like. For some additional information, we encourage you to go to a document that is known as the Georgia Procurement Manual. And you can access it through the link that I have here on the screen. The GPM online, there's also the web address directly for it. You can look at it in an online version, or you can actually print it out. Now, we do encourage you, if you look at the printed version, that you do go back and look at it, because it does change. So much of the information in there will not be directly applicable to how we are conducting our procurements. However, there is a section in there specifically for suppliers, and it contains a lot of information about how to access and use this system. So that's the only reason that we point that out. There are some additional resources that are available on their website. The link to that website is provided. There are many pre-recorded training webinars that you can view at any time you need to. The one that responds to what we have talked about today is the one at the bottom, entitled Respond to Events and Place Bids in Team Georgia Marketplace. Now, I'll say, in addition to this, we are looking to host some events in our offices to where anyone that is desiring to have direct training on how to access this, we're going to actually have DOAS to come and give us some tutorials into their system. So we'll be announcing some future dates for that as well. Important thing to note is each RFQC, an invitation to bid, will have an issuing officer whose name, phone number, and email address will be provided. And they are always the first point of contact, and they have to be, because we want to ensure that all contractors and all bidders have access to the same information at the same time. And the only way to do that is to make sure we coordinate that through a single person. However, if you're having problems with the system, of course, we don't own the system. And the DOAS has made their information available. So if you're having problems either getting registered or applying, their phone number is 657-6000, and they have an email address, procurementhealp@doas.ga.gov. So that's the end of my presentation. I know it's a lot of nuts and bolts. Thank you all for listening and staying awake during that. But we look forward to your participation, because we know we can't do it without